welcome G2 Chief Executive Officer, joined by Hunt Club Chief Executive Officer, Godard Abel and Nick Cromydas.
Big stage.
It's good music.
You want to start dancing?
My specialty.
Hey everybody. Amazing to be here at Silicon Slopes. And so I'm Nick Cromydas, co-founder and CEO of Hunt Club. And so Hunt Club's a new category of search firm where we help companies grow through trusted introductions from business leaders all across the country. So thinking hundreds of CMOs helping you find your next great marketing leader. And so coming to Salt Lake and spending all of my time thinking about talent, been so impressed with this ecosystem. And Godard and I were just talking about it and how everyone's so collegial, thoughtful, works together, cares, and really drives amazing results. And so my marketing team, even though I'm a Chicago Bulls fan, made me want to rock this on stage today. It's a little tight, so I'm not going to put it on, but we're going to invest a lot in Salt Lake to grow here. So speaking of talent, we've got some talent to the left of me. So Godard Abel, co-founder and CEO of G2. And many here know Godard, but for those who don't, he's one of the best software entrepreneurs in the world. And so Godard started 2 companies, exited for over $800 million. If that wasn't enough, he then co-founded G2, built it to over $1 billion valuation, and it's the world's largest software review marketplace. If that wasn't enough, he's also the executive chairman of 2 other companies, Logic.io and 3Kit, which are valued at over $300 million cumulatively. And so for most of us, we kind of struggle to get one thing off the ground and get a little bit of traction, but Godard's 5 for 5, and something tells me maybe just still starting, still early days still?
Hopefully.
So we're going to weave in 5 lessons on how he builds companies and really the things that he does to create success. So first, how do you ride big waves? Pick the macro trends that really allow you to create something in a rising tide. Second, building an entrepreneurial family. I'll let him share more as we go there. Third, talk about conscious leadership. How do you evolve as a founder, as a CEO, as a thought leader in a company to make sure you're continuing to grow as the company does? How do you build a peak culture? And then finally, navigating the ups and downs. And so all of us who've been a part of high growth companies, founded and grew businesses, it's not a straight line up, so he's the master at that. So everybody, let's give a round of applause for Godard Abel.
Well, thank you, Nick. And I did say backstage, where's my Karl Malone jersey?
Yeah. Someone's
if
got
you're
a Karl,
Stockton.
If anyone has a Malone jersey, yeah, I'll be a hype man for you anytime, Godard. So let's start off, maybe talk about your entrepreneurial story and journey. Was there a single moment that made you want to be an entrepreneur, or something you can remember that, made you want to start your career building businesses?
Yes. Well, I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs, and my father was in a very different industry, but he was an entrepreneur in the pump industry. He was making industrial pumps, and it was actually a company my grandfather had started in Germany right after World War II. And I always remember being inspired by my grandfather's story. He started his company in 1947. And at that time, he was living in Northwest Germany, which was destroyed after World War II. It was literally rubble. And my father was born out on a farm in the countryside. And I remember he told me he only ate potatoes for the first 9 years of his life. But what really impressed me about my grandfather's story, Wilhelm Abel, he decided to start a company, Abel Pumps, with his brother. And really, at that time, it was also like the last speaker, maybe a desperate moment in his life, because their economy was in shambles and they didn't really know what to do with their lives. They were already in their 40s. But he had a vision for a better pump design and decided with his brother to bring that in life. But it was kind of the ultimate bootstrap story. And then over 20, 30 years, built a company that has some scale. My father took it over, and that's actually how I wound up in America. I was born in Germany. And my father, as an entrepreneur, decided he wanted to go capture the US market, the largest market in the world, and he couldn't do it from Germany. So he moved us to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, so I grew up there. But I always grew up to my dad talking about his business. Summers, I worked in his pump manufacturing plant. Weekends, I'd go in, sometimes play video games on his computers. And so I just grew up around it. And I think I always wanted to be like my dad and my grandpa. And so I think that's really what inspired me to become my own entrepreneur.
Love that. So in the family.
Yes.
So from pumps to software. So you always talk about riding big waves and figuring out the right trends to capture as you go build a business. Talk to us a little bit of how that focuses your decision on what types of companies to be in and how big macro changes in technology create great business ideas.
Yes, and I do think riding a big wave, that's what entrepreneurship's all about, and that's what can make it really successful and rewarding. But I remember in the 1990s, when I first started getting involved in entrepreneurship, there was one massive wave. And I think someone asked me, if you could tell your younger self, I think when I started my first company, it was at the end of 99. I think I was 27, 28 years old. What advice would you give to your younger self? And I think I just said, well, the internet's going to be huge. And also in that time, Amazon was started by Jeff Bezos, I think in 1995. And I was lucky to go to Stanford Business School in the late 90s. And Stanford's in Palo Alto in the middle of the Silicon Valley. And I was there from 1997 to 1999. And it was just such a boom time in the internet that frankly it was a wave that was impossible to miss because I was there. And then I really brought, the first company was called Big Machines. It was really inspired by bringing that wave to my father's industry. And my father was in pumps. And I always remember I went back home Thanksgiving 1999. And I said to my dad, how's this massive wave, the internet, going to affect you? And even back then, everyone was afraid of getting Amazoned, and I think that's still true today. The one entrepreneur I would never want to compete with is Jeff Bezos. And at the time, though, Amazon was only selling books and maybe CDs, but very simple products. And so I asked my dad, how's this wave of the internet going to change your pump business? And he just said it wasn't, which was very kind of shocking. But it spurred the idea of, I'm going to help my dad sell his pumps online, help him sell like Jeff Bezos, and that's really what spurred the idea for Big Machines and got me building my own company.
Has Bezos gotten to pumps yet?
No, not that I know. Not configurable complex pumps, which is what my father sold.
Still got a moat. Love it.
Yes.
So built Big Machines, had an amazing outcome. One thing I think that's really unique about Godard and the businesses he builds is this concept of what he calls an entrepreneurial family. And so amongst all of his businesses that he's created, he has a ton of talent that has built, scaled something with him, and have come back to do it again in a bunch of different businesses. So when you think about building your early stage team, how do you get that secret sauce or that right DNA for leaders you want to build with for decades?
Yeah, and my entrepreneurial family, it did start with my real family, because once I had this idea for Big Machines, my dad became my first customer and my first investor, and he was actually on the board of the first company. And although he knew nothing about software, he knew a lot about building businesses and was just really supportive of me. And then I reached out to my best friend, Chris Schutz from MIT, and he and I spent 4 years together at MIT in the early 90s. And he was frankly the best engineer I knew on the planet. And so when I had the idea for Big Machines, I said, let me call my best friend, Chris, see if he'll join me to build Big Machines. And luckily he said yes. And so he was the first member of the entrepreneurial family. And one interesting story, Chris and I are now building another company. 20 plus years later, Chris is the CEO of a company called Logic, in which I've invested. I'm on the board, so I'm helping him build his own business. But that was kind of the start. And then, but the entrepreneurial family now, we had a first company, Big Machines. We were eventually acquired by Oracle, but we grew the company to well over 300 people, 400 people. We took 100 of them, built the next company, SteelBrick, that became part of Salesforce. 5 of them went and started G2 with us. And so it's just spawned this talent. We love building companies together, and we're still doing it.
How are the board meetings with your dad?
And honestly, my father, and I also brought in outside investors. And so actually he was very balancing and helpful, because at least in the meeting he was always supportive. And sometimes he and I would both get annoyed together with the more professional VC investors.
Always put your dad on your board.
True. I was very lucky. He's a very supportive father.
Love it. So, you got your first exit with Big Machines, with Vista Equity, and then again with Oracle. Everyone dreams of building something, creating an outcome. It's why you start something sometimes, obviously, to create everlasting change, but also to create an outcome at some point, whether it's an IPO or whether it's, selling to a private company. How did that change your life, or did it?
I would say yes. And also our first company did have many years of struggle. So we didn't really get to our first significant liquidity event till 11 years in. And a lot of those first 11 years were a struggle. I remember 3 or 4 years in, we were almost bankrupt. And so I think by the time we got to 11 years in, and we also had early angel investors, we were kind of very desperate, hungry for some liquidity. So we did sell 51% of the company to some growth equity investors, and it did feel great. I actually always remember the moment, and we'd moved that company to Chicago, started in Silicon Valley, but I remember I was with my wife and one of my best friends, Rocky Pantikas, another great Greek friend of mine, like Nick, and we were driving down to Chicago for a holiday dinner. We were just going out with our wives, and I remember during that car ride, this was December 2010, and we had just kind of closed the deal, but I remember during that ride, somehow I got an alert on my phone, the money has hit your bank account, and it was millions of dollars, and I do remember wow, just feeling a moment of elation and relief.
And do you think that gave you permission to continue to swing bigger and build bigger businesses and continue to go for scaling things in a larger ecosystem? Did that release a pressure valve and allow you to just go after big ideas?
Yes, and I think the last speaker also talked about taking care of your family. I have a wife and 3 young kids, and it did feel wonderful where I kind of felt okay, I've got enough, where I know our house is paid off, they're taken care of, they have enough money for college. So it was a great relief to take that anxiety away and that fear. And then our next company, and that company, Big Machines later, was fully acquired by Oracle 2 years later, so we got more liquidity. And but then we were able to, the next company, the first $2 million, 85% of it was our own money. And so then we were able to really also shape the culture, the product, because we didn't have to go chasing investors. And so it did put us, I think, in a much better position to really build for the long term. And now as a family, I think we've spawned 7 companies. I've invested my own money in all of them. And so it's really fun to be able to do that. And you can also shape the companies even more the way you want.
Love that. So one thing we always talk about is this idea of conscious leadership and being self-aware and evolving to help groom and grow companies, but also you can change as the company changes to be what it needs to continue to scale. So one thing that's always been really impressive about watching your teams is the way they align, the way they care for one another, and the way they continue to evolve as leaders. What's your secret sauce to creating that energy in your leadership team and your culture to make sure that everyone's continuing to evolve to be the best version of themselves?
And I think that's the other thing I learned during my first company. One, I think what made building the second, third, fourth companies better was 1, having the capital, having the liquidity, but 2, also being able to deal better with the anxiety. And actually, I just got to see Steve Young backstage. Obviously, incredible, just human being and just everything he's accomplished in his life, but I also read his biography. And he talks about all the anxiety, the fear, the doubt that he faced. And frankly, my entrepreneurship experience has been very similar. And when I was building my first company, a lot of times I just felt overcome by anxiety, and I was eating too much, drinking too much. I was 20, 30 pounds heavier, wasn't taking good care of myself. And that was all, I think, due the anxiety of the business. And towards the end of building Big Machines, I met this conscious leadership guru, Jim Dethmer, through my YPO friends in Chicago. And he just taught me to be more conscious, to be more self-aware. And it just started with simple breathing, meditation exercises. And he also really changed my mindset to being more one of choice and being clear, I'm choosing to be an entrepreneur, I want to build these companies, and I'm going to accept that anxiety, that stress as part of it. And just having that conscious mindset has been so helpful to enjoy it much more, to be more connected with my family, my entrepreneurs, my colleagues. And we call all of that conscious leadership. And now we have a coach at our company, G2, Sue Heilbrunner. She's a brilliant coach, but she coaches me, coaches our whole leadership team on how to be more conscious, more self-aware, which we believe makes us better leaders, better grow the company, but also makes us better humans, more self-aware, and allows us to enjoy life more and suffer less from anxiety. So it's just been a wonderful part of my life and part of building companies.
Amazing. So switching gears a little bit, so we sold big machines, and then we decided we were going to go scale up steel brick. Tell us a little bit about that story, because it's a little bit different than the founding story of big machines, where you found something that was really interesting, you had a ton of domain expertise, and then you got on top of it and started to grow it. So tell us a bit of that journey.
Yeah, and I think after Big Machines was acquired by Oracle, we just had this sense that we could do, Big Machines ultimately became CPQ software, configuration, pricing, quoting, and we just thought we could do it better. You know, we learned so much the first time and did a lot of stuff wrong, and we just kind of wanted a do-over. And we also, speaking of riding big waves, we saw a big wave, which was Salesforce.com. This was in 2013, and we just saw them growing explosively. I think at that time they were still only at $1 billion or $2 billion in revenue. I think today they're 30, 40 billion. And so we just saw that ecosystem booming. We were a partner at Big Machines, but we also partnered with Oracle, which wound up acquiring us. And we just thought there was a huge vacuum in the Salesforce ecosystem, and we wanted to go do it again. And so we just said, let's do it again. And quickly, as I mentioned, pulled ultimately over 100 people out of Oracle. All our best people are entrepreneurial family, and we just said, let's do it again better. And that time we built it, purpose-built it for Salesforce, because we saw that massive wave, but it was better integrated, worked seamlessly, raised $70 million in 3 rounds, all within 2 years, and it was kind of a blur. And then 2 years in, Salesforce was a great partner, and they'd invested in our company twice. And I remember the last time they invested, their head of corporate development, John Smorgia, I said, we want to invest more. And I said, well, the VCs want all the money, but I'm like, if you let me meet with Mark one-on-one, you can have more. And I've always admired Mark as an entrepreneur and just want a chance to meet him, tell him our story as a partner. And I got to go to his house in San Francisco. He has a workhouse, Sea Cliff, overlooking the Pacific Ocean, Golden Gate Bridge, just incredible place. I was super nervous, but excited to meet him. And I remember I had like 20 slides prepared. I got like 1 or 2 slides in. He's like, just show me the demo. Like, what do you mean? Show me the demo. I'm like, okay, I'll show you the demo. And so showed him how Steel breaks seamlessly on the Salesforce platform, did quoting, pricing, ordering, even billing. And I think it was a really good demo, because at the end of that, 30 minutes in the meeting, he looked at John, who's sitting next to him. He's like, John, what should we do? And John's like, oh, they're a great partner. We've invested. It's all good. And he turned to me. He's like, oh, I think we should buy your company.
Right at the table there, like after you spun up a demo for 30 minutes.
Yeah, so it was a good demo.
Did you have the demo prepped?
I had it very prepped. I remember that weekend I was like practicing in my bed at night, and it was very prepared. And it went out seamlessly, but it was 14 years of practice, to be honest. And at first I said, well, I'm not sure we want to sell the company, which was true. You know, we just raised all this money, wanted to build a public company, but Mark was such an idol, and we were so tied into Salesforce that ultimately I said, Mark, if you really want to do this, you know, we'd rather do it with you. Certainly don't want to be a competitor, so if you want to be in our market, we want to do it with you. And so we joined his company, and that was phenomenally exciting. But it was a kind of a do-over, let's do it better, and it worked. Because in 2 years, we had as much success as we had in 13 in the first company. And that was also really gratifying to be able to do it again with our entrepreneurial family, ride another big wave, and really quickly come to a great outcome.
So the biggest wave to date, G2. So over 250 million raised, over 700 employees, valued at north of $1 billion. Tell us about that idea. How did that get started, and how'd you get it going? Right,
and G2 is all about riding a big wave. Many of you are riding it. And the year we started G2, it was right after I'd left Big Machines, but it was 2012. And also brilliant entrepreneur investor Mark Andreessen, who actually started my first wave. He started the first internet browser, actually University of Illinois back in 1994. Started a company called Netscape that unleashed the internet, the first big wave I rode. But then in 2012, he said, software is eating the world. And that's the wave G2's riding. Because there are so many software apps. Many of you are software entrepreneurs. And today on G2, there's well over 120,000 different software products.
It's amazing.
Just unbelievable. So our industry, software, there's so much innovation, so much growth. And the idea for G2 was, let's create a better way for software buyers, business software buyers, to discover software apps. And we thought buying and selling business software was way too hard, from our own experience at Big Machines, way too hard for our customers to find us. And we said, let's make it more like Amazon, back to Bezos. And let's make it really easy to discover apps, buy apps, like shopping on Amazon. And by 2012, we're all doing this as consumers. But the other key thing in consumer e-commerce, we all use reviews. So before I buy anything online, or a restaurant on Yelp, a hotel on TripAdvisor, I look at reviews. And that didn't exist for our industry. Our industry was relying on analysts, Gartner, Forrester, whom honestly I didn't love. As an entrepreneur, I loved my customers. I want to talk to my customers. I hated talking to analysts. And so we said, let's give all the power to the customers. Let's create a Yelp. We called it a Yelp for software. Yelp was just going public. And we said, let's let the people eating the food. And to us, Gartner was like a restaurant critic that actually couldn't eat the food. They didn't use the software. Like, let's ask the diners. And it was obvious, right? Like, we're like, this is in B2C and consumer. It's everywhere. Why isn't it in B2B software? So we decided with G2, let's bring that to B2B software.
You can see 1,000 reviews before you go get a cheeseburger, but when you buy a $100,000 piece of software, there's nothing beforehand. So.
Exactly. That was one of our, like, why can you get more insight on $10 cheeseburger than a $100,000 software package? And that's what we set out to change with G2. And it is really coming to life. It also took longer than we thought, but 10 years in, it's really working. And actually, one cool thing you showed me backstage, Nick, it was an email from an investor. Well, I think we can name them. Sequoia. Some of you might have heard of them. Anyone heard of Sequoia? But a VC firm, and they sent Nick an email. I was very proud of it. They're like, Nick, we want to talk to you. I'm a growth investor at Sequoia. You have great reviews on G2. And Nick's company, Hunt Club, Incredible Talent Network, they have great reviews on G2. I'm a happy client. I don't think I actually wrote a review. I should do that. But
you need to write a review.
But you have many clients that have written great reviews of Hunt Club, why they love your talent network. And but it's also, I love that because I've built it for entrepreneurs like you to validate your solution based on customer voice, create happy customers, and then let us do the marketing. And so that's coming to life. But also cool that investors are now using it to discover the next great app. So my one plug, if you're a software entrepreneur, we built it for you. You can list your product for free, get reviews for free, and then you'll start getting emails from Sequoia once you have great reviews, asking them to invest in your company. It's that easy.
Got to respond now. So transition from founder to CEO. So totally different scale that you're operating in now than the previous two pre-acquisition. What's that been like? And give us some lessons and some learnings from that journey.
And I think it is hard for most of us founders, CEOs. I think, Nick, you've gone through it. You have 150 people now?
A little bit more, but yeah.
200?
200.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're becoming a big company. We have over 700 people now at G2. And I think what you do discover as a founder, CEO, at the beginning, you kind of just do everything, which actually as an entrepreneur is kind of fun. Yeah, I remember at the beginning, like I set up our QuickBooks, I did finance, I did the contracts, I did legal, wrote the product specs, wrote our first grid design, designed the product. At the beginning, kind of sold our first customers with my co-founders. We just did everything, right? And then you have to learn eventually how to become a manager. And it is a big transition. And especially now at G2, I'm lucky, and you've actually helped us build our senior leadership team. You recruited our CMO, Amanda Malco, and she came from MailChimp, very experienced enterprise CMO. And all of a sudden, they don't want you doing everything, nor can you. They want you to create a clear vision, align everyone. And I learned a lot from Mark Benioff there. He uses this tool called the V2 Mom to write down your vision. That's the first V, your values. And then you write down your methods at least once a year, create measures, goals for each of them, a bit like OKRs, and you're clear about your obstacles. But your job becomes more about bringing in great talent, like our CMO, Amanda. I brought a new CRO, Mike. My whole leadership team the last 2 years is new because I hired leaders that could manage hundreds of people, hopefully scale to thousands. And but as a CEO, you totally have to change, right? Because we can't be micromanagers. We have to be visionaries, align our teams, jump into the details when needed, but most of the time, our job is very different.
Do you miss QuickBooks?
I do. I actually got some joy out of doing our accounting.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure it's there for you if you want to take it back.
But now we probably have like a 20, 30-person finance team. We do it much better, right? And you also realize at the end of the day, I wasn't the best accountant. I took one accounting class, but I wasn't a professional.
You can hire him now. So when you think about like all the lessons, all the different versions of the entrepreneurial journey you've had, like ups, downs, 13 years, many really tough times, almost running out of financing, your dad probably coming at you in the boardroom, 2 years successful. Tell us like your number one or number two takeaways for managing difficult moments.
Yeah, and probably my worst moments were in 2003. And while this internet wave and the cloud wave ultimately were incredible for business software, in hindsight, we were too early. And these manufacturers like my dad's that we wanted to sell, by 2001, they were saying the internet was a fad. Like most new technologies got overhyped, and then there was a lashback where everyone said, oh, all these internet companies, .coms, they're dumb ideas, they're going to go bankrupt. So we had 3 really hard years after we started where I think my business plan was to sell 50 customers a year. And I remember in 2001, we only signed up 2. So we achieved 4% of our customer goal.
Missed the plan a little.
Felt horrible. And I did feel like a failure. I had all this anxiety. But the worst part is I was going to lose my dad's money. And
makes Thanksgiving tough.
And ruin my best friend Chris's career. So when you build it with family, like I think that was felt like the biggest burden. I didn't want to let my family down. And so it was really hard. And I think what I learned in those moments, I think it was just kind of accepting that. But probably the biggest thing is just perseverance and grit. And what gave me the energy was actually believing in my team. And we did sign up about 12 early customers those first 3 years. And they were having success with our platform. They were having success selling with the internet. The wave was starting to work. And so we just believed eventually the internet, cloud software is going to become mainstream. We just have to persevere. And we hunkered down, scaled down from 70 to 20 people, went to organic mode. And Chris and I, we just said, we're not going to let each other down. We're not going to let our customers down, our team down. And we just ground it out, made it work. And by 2007, it started to work and started taking off. But just a lot of grit, perseverance, and believing in your vision, believing in your team, believing in your family. I think that's how you get through the tough times.
Love it. Well, everybody, round of applause for Godard Abel. Thanks for being up with us, Godard.
Thank you, Nick.
Yeah.
And one last thing I'll say, Nick is now part of my family too, my entrepreneurial family, and I'm proud to be an investor in his company and helping the next generation of better entrepreneurs like Nick succeed.
Yeah.
So it's
We're
exciting.
lucky to have you. Thank you, Godard.
Thank you.